Hey, what's going on everyone? How are you? Today we're back with my half-floor rocket I built. We're going to be using it to launch our Duna base modules for the upcoming long-term base we'll be building in the next episode. I decided to keep the landings in this recording again, even though they are pretty similar to what was in the previous video. I decided to keep them because there was an edited config from the landing legs that were on those boosters in the previous video. I was testing to see the limits of the heat and torque tolerances, and I just must have forgot to switch those out again before I started recording. So I decided to record this again to show they really have no issues with or without that edit. Anyway, here we are with our first stage boosters heading back to the KSC, just guiding their way in using the grid fins and some light help from the air brakes. These being the first stage boosters, you might think these are the easiest to fly back, but they can actually be a bit of a struggle fighting through the thick atmosphere. The air brakes are pretty useful at helping with that and letting the boosters orient themselves retrograde here. You also want to make sure the upper tanks on these boosters have a higher priority fuel flow. That leaves us with the bottom tanks holding most of the mass and helping the booster just naturally want to land retrograde. And we're already onto the second stage booster. It looks like I staged this one a bit early, but it's not going to be a big deal here. These are light payloads compared to what we were doing in the previous video, but unfortunately I am coming back with some excess fuel I'll have to burn off before landing. Just like before, I am only pointing these boosters back retrograde and then switching to stability assist so that I can burn back to the KSC on the same trajectory I ascended on. Alright, and on to our third stage booster, and like I said in the last video, it doesn't make much sense for us fuel wise to fly this one back to the KSC, so you know, SpaceX has their barge and we have a large aircraft carrier stationed out here just off the coast. This took me, I think, 3 attempts to get this landing onto the carrier, and it's not the most perfect landing at all. I did have one that was better after this, but when I was editing this video, I decided to keep this landing in as it kind of just wins out for style points. Finally, on to our payload. I built these out and balanced them all to be able to get 2 of these Duna landers up at the same time. They will both dock onto the cargo freighter, and the delivery stage will then return back down to the KSC. Setting up a few maneuver nodes here to get a close rendezvous with our Duna Freighter. Just coasting into the freighter here, and like always, my rendezvous end up on the dark side of Kerbin. But with that, we also get this nice little sunrise here. And this lander getting ready to dock will be the supplies for the ground construction kit that we need. So this will be helping us build the interior and exterior domes we will have on Duna, as well as the main hub for our base. So those 3 modules will actually be built on site using the ground construction mod, like we did with the tail section of the freighter here. This module is going to be the fuel cell. I decided to run the base off of liquid fuel and oxidizer, so we'll just be drilling ore up there with our refueling rover, and we'll use that to power the base. I opted to do that over nuclear just to try to be a little bit more realistic, as it's probably not the best idea to have a nuclear reactor sitting right outside the base where at least 4 of our Kerbals are going to be living for the next few years. You've probably noticed that all the Duna landers are fitted with claws and not docking ports. This was a design choice to make the landers as universal as possible so that they all fit nicely under the crane we already have landed on Duna waiting for us. The claws help keep a low profile lander and also fill in as some decent landing legs if needed. If you are as horrible at docking as I am, they can also be quite a bit easier to dock with while you're still learning. Full disclosure with this landing, I crashed like 5 times here, and in a few seconds I think you will see why. I used tweak scale for these landing legs pretty much out of laziness instead of just grabbing the next size up. Then I decided it was a good idea to update some mods when I'm in the middle of recording a series. Smart. So luckily for me, the only issues I've noticed is anything I used tweak scale on was readjusted to the original size, including these legs, so I ended up just gracefully landing it down on the engine and fixing the issue afterwards for our future launches. And just for the sake of time, I decided to put the last 2 launches together. So on the left we have our satellite and workshop, and on the right we have one of our habitats and the material kits for our ground construction kit. The habitat and material kits being the heaviest of the launches, it did dawn on me that I probably should have launched that first just to show all of the landings with that rocket. It just wasn't something I recognized at the time. I did, however, land those off screen just to make sure there weren't any issues with those boosters, but there was no problems. We actually were launching 30 tons more in the previous video using the same design. None of these launches really pushed the limits of the rocket this time. I realize this might not be the most exciting part of the mission, just docking these modules up to the freighter, but I decided to keep these in just to show the entire process from start to finish. It also gives a good opportunity to judge me while I struggle to get these things docked here. So our freighter is filled up. Now I'm just situating all the modules again to look nice for a cool flyby shot of our ship. Because I made the mistake with the edited config, I felt like I needed to make up for it a little, or at least make this process of landing somewhat more entertaining this time. So I took the time to make sure we got a somewhat acceptable VAB landing here. Jumping back to our crew, they've been living on the surface pretty much out of their ship for the last 4 months, and now we are finally to the point in this series where we get to start playing with some of the toys we built. So I'm just backing out our refueling rover for its inaugural drilling. The area we're in doesn't have the greatest ore content, but with a 5-star engineer, we should be okay. I brought with us some of the deployable science experiments from the Breaking Ground DLC. I haven't had the opportunity to use these before, so I'm sure you can tell I'm pretty clueless about how to use them at first. Eventually, I realized we need to get Bill's engineering skills out here to help us a bit. The engineers give a power bonus to the solar panels and the RTG as well. I think the science experiments like the seismometer that we brought get a time bonus being deployed by Bob. I'm not an expert, but if you haven't used these parts before, you just need a control station, power, so the solar panels for daytime and the RTG to hold you over through the nights, and then whatever science experiments you decide to bring along. You also have the Communitron, which acts as a science relay for your experiments to transmit that precious science data back to Kerbin. I'm a big sucker for animation, so I really enjoyed plopping these down and watching them all deploy. Jeb, with not much to do, is grabbing the last of our deployable science units. Once these were down, I did eventually go around and replace them with the appropriate professions to maximize our received bonus. Jeb's last exciting job for the day is cleaning this area up and prepping it for the landers in the next episode. I'm just going around trying to clear up as much of the part count here as possible. I also plan to move the small glider plane we have over there out of the physics range so that we only have our crane and the scissors lift left down in the landing area. And now Bill heading into the rover to help out with the drilling while Jeb's work is done here for the day. Nice work, Jeb. So our rover is filled up, and now I'm using the Kerbal inventory system with the Kerbal attachment system to basically put a gas cap on our ship here and transfer the fuel we just drilled and refined over to our big cargo carrier, so that we can head back home to our workstation in orbit where the crew has been living for the past couple years here. After a long 4 months living on the surface and rationing their food, the crew is totally ready to get back up to the station. And while I'm mostly kidding here, I was using the life support in a bit of a cheaty way where we were just producing enough food each day from the fertilizer to keep our Kerbals from starving. This also allowed us to keep them functional and not turn into tourists like the USI mod would normally have them do. So, in a way, rationing while on the surface was a pretty real mechanic that was used. And back to our orbital home with more than enough supplies to last us throughout the rest of the space build. And that wraps it up for this episode. I know it was a long video, but I really wanted to get as much of the series wrapped up as possible here so that in the next and final episode in this series we could just focus on the construction and building of our Duna colony. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you watching, and if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe for more. Thanks again, everyone.